Good afternoon and welcome to Midday Prime. In the next 1 hour, we bring you all the stories and updates from India and across the world. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. We'll take stock of the rising COVID cases in the country. Meanwhile, in a big development, faster approval to more foreign vaccines in India is expected to boost the fight against the pandemic. Also, India's flagship conference on geopolitics, Raisina Dialogue, kickstarts today with focus on the pandemic and India's role in health solutions. Updates from the poll-bound states. Election Commission is busy making leaders stick to the model code of conduct. All that and more. First, the big news at this hour. Amid rising cases of COVID-19, Centre decides to fast-track emergency approval for foreign vaccines in the country. Decision taken to widen the basket of vaccines in India. Russian vaccine Sputnik gets approval. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to inaugurate today the 6th round of Raisina Dialogue, India's premier global conference on geopolitics. 150 speakers from 50 countries to take part in the event. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian begins his 3-day visit to India. At meeting with Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar, the French minister will call on Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the evening. After imposing a ban on TMC chief Mamata Banerjee, Election Commission now puts 48-hour ban on BJP's Rahul Sinha for alleged inflammatory speech, while seeks explanation from party's Bengal chief Dilip Ghosh. Sushil Chandra assumes charge as the Chief Election Commissioner of India, replaces Sunil Arora, who demitted office on Monday. UK adds Pakistan to the list of 21 high-risk countries with unsatisfactory money laundering and terror financing controls. Pakistan has already been listed as high risk by international watchdog Financial Action Task Force. Indian New Year and Chaitra Navratri begin today. Festival also being celebrated as Baisakhi in Punjab, Gudi Parva in Maharashtra and Bihu in Assam. President, Vice President, Prime Minister wish people on the occasion. Let's now begin with the big news. Now, the centre has decided to fast-track emergency approval for foreign-produced COVID-19 vaccines that have been granted emergency use authorization in other countries. This is to increase the number of vaccines for domestic use and also expedite the pace and coverage of vaccination in India. The matter of augmenting the basket of vaccines available for fighting the pandemic, as well as to accelerate the pace and coverage of domestic vaccination program, was discussed in the 23rd meeting of the National Expert Group on Vaccine Administration for COVID-19. This was held on 11th April 2021, chaired by Dr. V.K. Paul, Member Health Niti Aayog. After comprehensive deliberation, we now take you live to the Raisina Dialogues. External Affairs Minister addresses the curtain raiser session of the dialogue.
It is, taking the Paris agenda forward through, initiatives like the International Solar Alliance, or, how to respond collectively towards disaster resilience. So there are very practical ways by which we have demonstrated our belief in the world as a family. And the vaccine is only the recent example. And for those who actually question international cooperation, I want people to also understand this, that our ability to make vaccines, as Vijay would confirm, is itself a result of international cooperation. So international cooperation is not a one-way street where we are giving things to other people and somewhere shortchanging ourselves. I think people need to need to understand that.
Right. Well, thank you for that. And certainly from the perspective of the Gates Foundation, our cooperation in India over the last 20 years has included a great deal of scientific partnership and collaboration, including with what are now the large global vaccine manufacturers, where partnerships with us and with the Gavi Vaccine Alliance are part of what have helped transform India into the global leader it is today. But Dr. Vijay Raghavan, if I could just push you a little bit more on that in the spirit of your role as co-chair on scientific innovation related to COVID-19, even with that background, I think it's been a pretty unprecedented effort in India, and in terms of how you've accelerated and scaled up vaccine development. And could you shed a little bit more light about just how you've done that and what you think lies behind that?
Thank you very much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here with you and our External Affairs Minister. And, as we just heard, international collaboration is just that, it's a collaboration. And if you look at the start of the pandemic, India was in a position where PPEs, healthcare equipment, ventilators were all in short supply because of a global supply chain being affected, because of a few strong nodes dominating. Now, we learned from that lesson very rapidly and immediately did two things. We scaled up the manufacture of all this, but at the vaccine front, we did something which is pretty impressive. In addition to scaling up our manufacturing of vaccines developed elsewhere, we also developed vaccines here. And that's something quite impressive. India became immediately not just a huge vaccine exporter and manufacturer, but also a vaccine developer. Not just the big companies, but our startups, our academia went into vaccine development and deployment. And you're going to see the outcome of that very soon. So this reflects a very changed situation where not only could we serve the current pandemic well, but our preparedness for the next one and a preparedness for global service on this front has been incredibly ramped up.
So within that context, Minister, if I can come back to you, there's been a lot of discussion about equitable access to vaccines globally. Clearly, this is a pressing issue of our time. We know, and certainly within the United States, for example, where I'm speaking from, while there have been significant support to COVAX, there has not been a lot of support around actual distribution of vaccines into other countries or other parts of the world. Whereas India, through your Vaccine Maitri initiative, you have 85 countries already, I believe, have had access to vaccines who otherwise wouldn't have had. So in that context, it would be great to hear just your thoughts on how India views platforms like that, but also COVAX and other bilateral and multilateral approaches, both for the current crisis, but also this is something the world is going to have to grapple with going forward as to what the right structure for future challenges in health and beyond health are.
Right. Mark, I'd like to really pick up on a point which Vijay made before answering your question, which is we are fighting this pandemic. But even as we are doing this, we need to understand, the analogy I draw is a typhoon. That, once you have a typhoon, be sure there are going to be more. Okay? So everything we are doing for now, but everything we are doing is also preparing ourselves for what is to come. Now, I think equitable access is critically important in this because, we all know that no one will be safe till everyone is safe. But while we know that, we don't necessarily practice it. Okay, so quite honestly, the global tendency has been to sort of circle the wagons and say, well, I'm going to look after myself mostly. Now, I understand that. Okay, I'm not against that. I think if any country is under stress, if the numbers are going up, which by the way they are for us right now, I think it's completely legitimate that we we purpose, our production to where the immediate challenge is. But the fact is that, to the extent that you have margins and the ability and the obligation to help others, I think it's the decent thing to do. As I said, doing good is also doing smart. Now, in our case, we obviously, our vaccine producers had some contractual commitments. They had commitments to COVAX, as you know, where we actually helped health workers in a number of African countries with some of our own neighbors in South Asia, with the CARICOM, with the FIPIC, because countries like, small countries, it isn't just the ability to buy. They don't have actually the wherewithal to really access the market. So I think it's important. And again, while we are discussing vaccines right now, understandably, I want you to look at it in terms of a larger picture, okay? Because in my view, one of the real debates about globalization has been the equity and fairness of globalization. It is because globalization has not been beneficial between societies and within societies that you've had people questioning the virtues of globalization. And those who are truly committed to globalization and want it to do well should, I think, devote themselves to that. And I look at our partnership, the government's partnership with the Gates Foundation, as a kind of global fairness coalition, if you would, that we are making an effort really to make sure that, the sort of the weaker, vulnerable, less privileged people within societies and among countries don't get left behind. But to this, other than doing what we are doing, I think this idea, it's important that there are additional capabilities, because it isn't enough, we're not, unless you have greater production, distributive justice by itself will not be adequate. And I think that sense of India as an additional engine of global growth. Now, Vijay referred, for example, to the fact that you have India-developed vaccine as well. I mean, which is a very, very important development. So I think part of India's rise would be really to bring to demonstrate additional capabilities. And I think the world would be better served by those additional capabilities which are in the hands of a country which embraces the world, which actually, as I said, believes in international cooperation, whose heritage it is to do that, and who, by the way, is prepared to sort of put its money where its mouth is, or at least its capability where its mouth is. And as we have seen, whether it's hydroxychloroquine or whether now vaccines, we have stepped forward. I think it's something which is worth underlining.
As well, I very much support your vision of a global fairness coalition, if you like, and the Gates Foundation. Our core mission when we were set up over 20 years ago, which is carved on our headquarters outside Seattle, is that every person deserves the chance to a healthy and productive life. And in fact, the outrage that Bill and Melinda Gates felt when they saw that many easy to access, particularly health treatments, but also in agriculture and financial inclusion and sanitation, which the rich world got routine access to, were not being distributed across the developing world, is really the driving force behind all our work. And in that context, that's also been a core element of our partnership with India, as I say, initially in vaccines, where India has already become and developed strong local vaccines, like around the rotavirus, but also for domestic use and for global use. That linked to that is a vision of South-South development, which India again has been at the forefront of. And I think part of what we're seeing now, I hope, is a different kind of sets of South-South partnerships, which India is being a pioneer of. And I have you, Minister, just to talk a little bit about how you see that vision going forward, again, beyond health, including health, but beyond health.
Again, Mark, a lot of South-South cooperation has been around for a long time. I think a lot of people sincerely, genuinely are committed to it. But it's important, I think, with greater, greater globalization, stronger interlinkages, interdependence, more technology, and also more challenges, to make that a reality. I think a lot of it is today to take the fancy words in international relations and make them into practical initiatives. And foundations like yours clearly make a difference there. Now, when we speak of South-South cooperation, for us, a large part of that is within Asia and also our relationship with Africa. And we have certainly in the last 6 years since Prime Minister Modi came to office, we have really stepped on the gas. I mean, today, out of 54 African countries, for example, we have, I think in 51 countries, we have projects of some kind, either grant or lines of credit. A lot of them are lines of credit. And, it's for people who, in a sense, are who may not believe in it or who are a bit cynical. Often people think of it as self-interest. Okay, and I grant you, I mean, in international relations, there is an element of that. But I think if you look at a lot of what we have done, and some of the examples, I mean, a country like Mauritania, okay, it's the other end of Africa. I mean, my strategic interest there is not particularly high. But the fact that we could go out there and build a milk processing plant, or the fact that we've been very active in water treatment systems in Tanzania and Mozambique, or in reviving, we've done a textile plant in Kenya or a cement plant in Djibouti, sugar in different countries. And a lot of what we are now trying to do, using technology. We have a very ambitious initiative for telehealth and teleeducation. And I think one of the lessons of COVID is going to be a greater digital reliance. So what we've been trying to do is really, in a sense, as they said, helping them to fish rather than giving them fish. And through enhancing capability building, whether it's in human capability or whether it's in asset creation, we have really today have a footprint which extends from the Pacific Island all the way through Asia, Africa to the Caribbean. And sometimes, in value terms, it may not be much, but it means a lot to the country concerned. I mean, one of the things which I met the president of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we actually helped to revive an arrowroot production factory, which meant an enormous amount to them. We are working, in fact, this is our biggest project today abroad, which is on a refinery, a petroleum refinery in Mongolia, which is of a totally different scale. So my point is today, for a country like India has, both in terms of our belief, in terms of our heritage and history, and in terms of our world strategy, that if we want to see a rebalanced world where there is much great, the diversity of the world is fully expressive in terms of better power distribution, better capability distribution, I think it makes eminent sense to go out there and, work with other countries and build up their capabilities. Obviously, we are on goodwill, but I think you actually create in the long term a much better world. And, we will focus on those areas which we are better at, which are obviously our strengths. I think we're doing a lot of IT abroad, a lot of digital stuff abroad. Agriculture, I think, is now an increasing area of interest. But my sense is, particularly post-pandemic, and I'm sure Vijay will bear this out, I think there's enormous interest in health security. And I see that really as a completely new area of priority international cooperation that is opening up. And I can assure you that we will be there doing, whatever is within, the realm of possibilities on our part.
Right. Well, one of the areas that I think is most important in that and has the most potential is in the scientific realm and the digital realm. And you mentioned digital financial inclusion, for example, is an area where we have partnered, again, with the Reserve Bank of India and others to help bring delegations from countries like Nigeria and Indonesia to learn from the Indian example on expanding financial access to the poorest. And Vijay, if I turn back to you, in areas that the minister already touched on a couple, in agricultural sciences, you and I had a recent conversation around some partnerships there. In things like other health areas like antimicrobial resistance or global health security and technology, I'm curious both how you see cooperation in research can be better enabled, including the role of partnerships with foundations like ours, but also just where you see the highest potential for applying science and technology to these national and global problems.
Thank you, Mark. As the minister just pointed out, the reach of India's interactions globally points to a truly global view of a sense of community, and not just. Now, taking this one step further into areas such as agriculture and health, which you pointed out, the pandemic has highlighted a simple point, that we must look at these issues in a comprehensive manner of One Health, and not matters such as what do I do with virology, what do I do with spillovers, what do I do with agricultural pests. Now, this One Health perspective is a big challenge. The West has addressed this so far by pouring in huge amounts of resources into solving problems in a manner which is disproportionately akin to a hammer on an ant, and this is not tenable to scale globally. India's approach, which combines quality science in partnership with the best in the West and elsewhere, but also with a digital reach which allows us to estimate who needs what precisely and deliver according to that requirement, rather than a broad brush requirement which may be either excessive in some areas or missing in others. Now, this kind of a digital feedback mechanism combined with real touch material changes in agriculture or health, what some people have referred to as the bridging the digital and the other divide, is something which India has become very good at. The payments portal, which you talked about, is one example. Scaling that has been absolutely terrific. This now can scale into other aspects, combining high-quality sensors, electronics, feedback into decision-making, and going back to what people need at the farm level. Their partnerships with the Gates Foundation, other similar organizations is important, because technologies which have been developed for all sorts of other reasons and which have come with all sorts of bells and whistles now need to be broken up into modules which can be adapted to this new global demand. And that's something we must partner and ensure that not only India, but all the world has access to.
So, Minister, if I can turn back to you in that context, that you mentioned the global health security agenda, and that is being vigorously discussed in global forums like the G7 and the G20, and that's on aspects both of how we continue to respond to the current crisis, which is very much with us and will be for a while longer in its implications, and also prepare and respond to future crises. And I'm actually serving on a G20 high-level panel to provide advice to the G20 on financing for future pandemic preparedness. Unfortunately, I would say the historical pattern is once crises move close to the rearview mirror, global cooperation around it tends to falter. That there are often fine words, but not a lot of actions and deeds. And we're facing not just this global health security, but also you mentioned early climate change. And I'm just curious to see both how optimistic you are that the global community will tackle these differently, and just where you see India's approach and potentially distinctive contribution.
Well, look, Mark, in a way, I think, today India is the laboratory. It is, to some degree, in certain areas, an example. It's certainly an additional capability. We hope, in many cases, it's a good partner. And I think it's also important we tell our own story effectively so that people really understand what's going on. You know, I have a 400, 800 story, which I'm actually surprised to see how little it's been picked up in the global media. And the 400 is the 400 million people into whose bank accounts we put in money without it getting lost on the way. And 800 million people were the 800 million people who actually got food from the government all through last year because of the lockdown and the disruption. Now, if you go anywhere in the world and say, listen, guys, I just paid out 400 million people and I fed 800 million people, you should make waves. For whatever reasons, we can, you know, it's a different subject. You can debate why it hasn't got the kind of attention and focus that it should have. But the answer to your question, how confident I am about the global community, I don't differ with you. I think that has been the experience that things do tend to move to the rear view mirror and the, you know, objects look further and further away as you look at the rear view mirror. But I think that is why it is important for countries to step forward and make sure that that spotlight is not taken away. And certainly a lot of what we do, I mean, it wasn't that our health cooperation with, say, Africa, as you know, it wasn't that it took place in crisis and it got switched off. I mean, so we would certainly like to remain steady, reliable, good, exemplary partners, if you would, for the global South, and in many cases for countries not from the South as well. And I want to add one more thing, and this is not a health security or even a developmental point. Look, there are powers and powers. I mean, every big power rising is unique, okay? I would like to be an enlightened power, which does not do what all the others did before me, which is to shut the door as soon as you entered the room, okay? I would like to make sure that the door is open for other powers to come in. But I truly believe, for example, the rise of Africa. Actually, the world will not be multipolar until the rise of Africa, for example, and not just the rise of Africa, actually takes place. So to me, to go back to your first question, you know, the world is a family. I would like to be an enlightened power which not only organizes its own rise, but which also facilitates the rise of others so that, as I said, the real diversity of this world is fully reflected in international affairs. And to do that, I must keep looking at those challenges and crises as they come and work with other countries. And that is exactly what is the foreign policy vision of my Prime Minister. And that's what we try to do in Indian diplomacy.
Well, thank you, Minister. I think I could not think of a better note to close on. And as a South African, I'm very pleased to hear your vision about the importance and the future role of Africa. And as a global citizen leading a global foundation, I'm even more pleased to hear about your vision of, you know, an enlightened approach to global affairs, which really is a both and. And I think to your 400 and 800 story, certainly we at the Gates Foundation have been highlighting how India's domestic response on, you know, food security, on access to financial inclusion is both an amazing feat in itself, but also a great model for those countries across the rest of Asia, in Africa, across the world to follow. And as we look forward into what will still be a very challenging period in terms of addressing the COVID response and global health security, I think we're both reassured and excited to hear India's commitment to continued global leadership, and even more excited to continue to be a partner with Vijay and across the scientific community and the research and development community in India, which is an incredibly vibrant one. So with that, a huge thank you to both of you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And you're watching live the opening session of the prestigious Raisina dialogue. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Shankar was putting forth India's perspective on the matter. Raisina dialogue, this edition focuses on the ongoing pandemic and the manner in which India is at the center of the health solution that it is providing within the country and also across the world. Dr. S. Shankar spoke about the manner in which India has been addressing the concerns, the challenge, the requirements within the country and abroad during the times of the pandemic. And as we were discussing earlier, the centre has decided to fast-track emergency approvals for foreign-produced COVID-19 vaccines that have been granted emergency use authorization in other countries. Now, this is to increase the number of vaccines for domestic use and expedite the pace and coverage of vaccination in India. And earlier today, India approved the third COVID-19 vaccine for the country, Sputnik from Russia. The expert panel reviewing Dr. Reddy's lab application for approval to the Russian vaccine candidate on Monday recommended that the approval be given to the human adenovirus flu virus-based vaccine. The vaccine is indicated for active immunization to prevent COVID disease in individuals over the age of 18 years. It should be administered intramuscularly in 2 doses of 0.5 ml each with an interval between 2 doses of 21 days. Meanwhile, today is day 3 of the countrywide Tika Utsav or Vaccine Festival. Day 2 of the 4-day Tika Utsav saw many workplace vaccination centres operational across the country. Over 40 lakh vaccine doses were administered yesterday. Also, 71,000 COVID vaccination centres were operational, marking a significant rise of an average of 26,000 operational vaccination centres. The cumulative number of COVID-19 vaccine doses administered in the country so far stands at over 10.85 crore. In terms of number of daily doses administered globally, India continues to remain at the top with an average of around 40.55 lakh doses of vaccine administered per day. And Dr. N. Mathur, Director, Lady Hardinge Medical College, is joining us to give us a perspective on the manner in which the challenge of the pandemic is being dealt with. Dr. Mathur, good afternoon and welcome to this program. First, your thoughts on the decision to fast-track to include more foreign vaccines in the basket of vaccines that India already has. Given the sharp rise in COVID cases, how significant do you think that decision could be?
I think it is a very significant decision and it is a very welcome decision because we need to vaccinate the whole country in the priority groups first, but we ultimately have to reach each and every individual. That is our ultimate goal. And to achieve that, we are a country of 135 crore people and most of the vaccines will require 2 doses. So we are looking at 270 crore doses, which is a very big number. And for that, 1 or 2 companies may not be able to expedite the process. So to expedite the process of vaccination, it is very important that in the basket we have very many vaccines.
And sir, your thoughts on the sharp rise of COVID cases in the recent weeks that we've seen and vaccine as a solution. I'm asking this question also in the perspective of some reports that the medical experts who've been vaccinated also caught the infection. So in such a context, how significant is having more vaccines on board?
It is very, very important. I can say this much with a lot of responsibility that it is very important that we vaccinate everyone. Because one thing that we have seen is that people who have got both the vaccines inoculated, they have been inoculated with both the vaccines, it has prevented, this process has prevented them entering into the ICU and dying. So if that is the case, then the vaccination has done its job. The job is basically to prevent the severe disease, prevent people getting into the ICU and prevent them from dying. Even if the mild disease continues, it's fine. I mean, it's like any other mild fever or mild viral fever. That is okay. But and if that thing can be achieved with the vaccine has done its job. So it's very important, absolutely important, that everyone gets vaccine.
Right. And sir, it's not just about the number of vaccines available, it's also about the health infrastructure that will be used to administer the doses. On that front, do you also see a need for expansion so that when more and more vaccines are approved, there is also the health staff to administer them to people?
That will, I don't foresee it to be a problem at all. We can vaccinate and we have been vaccinating for last 2 months, and we know it started on 16th of January. Until now, the experience is that there are not many adverse reaction, and there are no very, very adverse reaction right at the time of vaccination. So this can be further enhanced. This process can be further expedited, and many centers can be opened. And the government is already opening more and more and more centers.
Right. And amidst this conversation on vaccination, sir, how would you like to emphasize the importance of COVID-appropriate behavior? Because much of the concern has also been that people, some sections may have let their guards down, given that vaccination drive is going on at a faster pace.
Yes, absolutely. The COVID-appropriate behavior, there can't be any letdown till the last person is vaccinated. So you have to maintain the COVID-appropriate behavior for a very long time till we have a very good amount of herd immunity in the community. And even beyond that, I mean, COVID-appropriate behavior will have to go along. I would say even if we acquire the herd immunity, because the person who has not been vaccinated can still be infected, and the infection can be very, very severe if he has not been vaccinated.
And sir, your thoughts on the numbers that we are witnessing in the recent weeks, a sharp rise, particularly some states where the numbers have been rising. Your thoughts, sir, as a medical expert, what is leading these numbers to rise, even while we are talking about vaccination and the drive is going on at a fast pace?
See, it is combination of the new strains and the non-COVID appropriate behavior, which people have become little little careless in last few weeks. So that has, both the combination are playing the role and they are producing this havoc.
Right. And sir, we know that as of now, people of the age of 45 years and above are eligible to get vaccination. There's also been a growing call from the civil society if that age group could be expanded, if more and more people could get vaccine. Do you think that could be an important strategy going forward?
Yes, I think, see, the government has to see its stock of vaccine and then has to prioritize, right, because some group is definitely more vulnerable than the other. So it is very logical that the government will prioritize as per the risk of the severity of infection that it foresees. So priority is done because of that.
And sir, talking about COVID-appropriate behavior, it is also important to remind our viewers that even after getting the vaccine, it's important to continue with the COVID-appropriate behavior. Help us understand the importance of that as well, sir, whether or not you've got a vaccine.
Yes, the COVID-appropriate behavior has to continue because you have to prevent, you are still able to infect others. And so vaccine prevents the severe disease. It doesn't prevent infection. And you can still harbor the infection and which you can give to others. So COVID-appropriate behavior will have to continue.
Right there, Dr. Mathur, thanks very much for joining us in the program and sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you. And moving on now to our National Prime segment. Let's talk about the Elections and Election Commission. Sushil Chandra assumes charge as the new Chief Election Commissioner. Chandra is the 24th CEC as he takes over from Sunil Arora, who is retired. Before taking charge as the CEC, Chandra has served as Election Commissioner for 2 years, supervising assembly polls in various states. During his term in office, he will oversee the conduct of polls in 5 states in the days ahead: Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Goa, Uttarakhand and Manipur. Meanwhile, Election Commission of India has warned BJP leader Shubhendu Adhikari over a speech delivered by him on 29th of March. The Commission advised Adhikari to desist from using such statements while making public utterances when the Model Code of Conduct is in force. An Election Commission of India has also asked West Bengal BJP chief Dilip Ghosh to explain his stand by Wednesday 10 a.m. over his statement on Sitakuchi, Coach Bihar violence. The Commission has barred BJP leader Rahul Sinha from campaigning for 48 hours for his alleged remarks over CRPF personnel in Sitakuchi. Meanwhile, the Election Commission has imposed a 24-hour-long ban on West Bengal Chief Minister and Trinamool Congress Supremo Mamata Banerjee for violating Model Code of Conduct. The ban has come into effect from 8 p.m. yesterday and will be enforced till 8 p.m. today. The Election Commission, in a 5-page order, has said that Mamata Banerjee made highly insinuating, provocative remarks laden with serious potential of breakdown of law and order, thereby adversely affecting the election process. And External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar earlier today met Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France, Jean-Yves Le Drian. Delegation-level talks between the two countries are underway on bilateral, regional and international issues of mutual interest. The French Foreign Minister is on a 3-day visit to India. The Drian visit will pave the way for further strengthening of partnership across trade, defense, climate, migration, mobility, education and health sectors in the post-COVID context. The minister is also scheduled to participate in the ongoing Raisina dialogue. Union Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan today addressed the WHO National TB Elimination Program Technical Consultant Network teams. The Union Minister said his addressal that an action plan is imperative for the target elimination of tuberculosis in India by the year 2025. He further added, it is the need of the hour to make this a people's movement to see the effective implementation of this action plan.
Without the active participation from each one of you. On the World TB Day recently, I had officially called out for a TB Mukt Bharat. To fulfill our dream of a TB Mukt Bharat, we need to make this into a genuine people's movement. We will have to do more over and above what we are currently doing.
And India's ancient traditional knowledge system has scientific basis. Such traditional knowledge with their scientific facts are required to be disseminated to masses for more awareness. CSIR, NIC, AIR and Vijayana Bharati have released a thematic luni-solar calendar. This thematic wall calendar is based on the theme Food as Medicine. The aim of the effort is to make the calendar more user-friendly based on science. During the present health crisis, the theme has a direct relevance to the common folk, wherein it becomes important to understand the correlation between diets, health and time. That is, what to eat and when to eat.
This lunisolar calendar which we follow is totally scientific. We knew how to calculate the movement of planets, particularly sun and moon in this calendar, and bring it to the society. So that was the main theme. And secondly, in the time of COVID, we have seen that, if you look at the recovery rate, or if you look at the mortality rate, death rate was very low and recovery rate was very high. So somehow we are correlating it with the kind of food we eat, the kind of immunity it gives to us. So, and India has very high biodiversity. So bringing our food into the main focus, that when we should eat what kind of food, the local food and the food related to the seasons. So these are the two concepts which we wanted to bring out in this particular calendar, and that's why we took the initiative.
And Chaitra Navratri begin from today. The holy festival of Navratri is celebrated for 9 days, will conclude on 22nd of April. The first day of Chaitra Navratri is celebrated as the new year by people of the Hindu community. People pray to 9 different forms of goddess Durga on these 9 days. Navratri is celebrated as a different festival in different states. Gudi Padwa in Maharashtra, Ugadi festival in Andhra. On the auspicious festival of Chaitra Navratri, people greet their loved ones wishes for happy festivities. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi extended his best wishes for various festivals being celebrated today. And those are messages of best wishes by Prime Minister on various festivities across the country. And on the occasion of Baisakhi, devotees thronged to seek blessings at the Golden Temple in Amritsar. Small number of devotees were seen taking customary dips in Sarovar as well. Baisakhi marks the start of the harvest season and thus has a special link with nature and farmers. And Prime Minister paid tributes to those martyred in the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. In a message, he said, tributes to those martyred in the massacre. Their courage, heroism, sacrifice gives strength to every Indian. And let's now take a look at what's making news across the globe. Now, the United Kingdom has added Pakistan to a list of 21 high-risk countries with unsatisfactory money laundering and terror financing controls. The list of 21 countries released by the UK government replicates those countries listed by the Financial Action Task Force as high-risk or under increased monitoring. Now, these nations pose a threat because of weak tax controls and lack of check and balance on terrorism financing and money laundering. The list has been released as part of the post-Brexit developments until the end of the Brexit transition period. The list of high-risk countries was determined by the European Union under the 4th Anti-Money Laundering Directive. The UK now has its own standalone list with Pakistan featuring in it. Reacting to the development, Pakistan Foreign Office spokesperson Zahid Hafiz Chaudhary said that UK's decision to include Pakistan in the list of money laundering and terrorist financing high-risk countries was not based on facts. Chaudhary expressed hope that UK would review its regulations. Meanwhile, Japan's decision to release contaminated Fukushima nuclear reactor water to sea has raised eyebrows internationally. Destroyed in the 2011 earthquake, Fukushima reactor has proved to be a thorny problem for the country. The move will upset the fishing industry in the area. About 1 million tons of contaminated water will be released into the sea after filtration of isotopes, leaving only tritium, a radioactive isotope which will be diluted below the regulatory levels to minimize damage. The disposal of contaminated water from Fukushima Daiichi plant run by Tokyo Electric Power will begin in 2 years, according to Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga. A decades-long decommissioning process will, however, follow the release. And South Korea has expressed strong concern over the decision by Japan to release the contaminated Fukushima reactor waters in the sea. Following the decision by Japan, South Korean officials from various ministries held emergency meeting. South Korea terms the decision by Japan as unacceptable and will urge transparent disclosure of treatment and filtration as per international norms. Residents and authorities assess the trail of damage left after the Category 3 cyclone Seroja made landfall on Sunday. In Australia, the cyclone disrupted electricity supply of tens and thousands of homes in the area. Officials estimate damage to be at least 70% structure in the coastal town of Kalbarri, a town near the state capital Perth. Many homes saw severe damage as the roofs were ripped off or collapsed. No death, however, or major injury has been reported. Let's now take a look on the updates as far as COVID-19 data globally is concerned. More than 13 crore 72 lakh people worldwide have so far tested positive for COVID-19, while over 11 crore people have also recovered from the virus. The deadly virus has so far claimed 29 lakh 59,000 lives globally. United States continues to be the worst affected country by the COVID pandemic. Now, so far, more than 3 crore 19 lakh people have tested positive for COVID in the United States alone. More than 5 lakh 76,000 people have died because of COVID in America. And the Director General of World Health Organization on Monday said that confusion and complacency in addressing COVID means the pandemic is a long way from being over, but it can be brought under control in the months with proven public health measures. WHO DG also said very few people are taking precautions, and it appears that some have been taking the approach that if they're relatively young, it doesn't matter if they get COVID-19.
We too want to see societies and economies reopening and travel and trade resuming. But right now, intensive care units in many countries are overflowing and people are dying. And it is totally avoidable. This disease is not flu. Young, healthy people have died. And we still don't fully understand the long-term consequences of infection for those who survive. This pandemic is a long way from over. But we have many reasons for optimism.
Meanwhile, the WHO team leader on COVID-19 said that the pandemic is growing exponentially, with a 9% increase in cases last week, the 7th consecutive week of increases and about 5% rise in casualties globally.
We are in a critical point of the pandemic right now. The trajectory of this pandemic is growing. In the 7th week in a row, we've had more than 4.4 million new cases reported in the last week. If you compare that to a year ago, we had about 500,000 cases being reported per week. Last week, we had 4.4 million cases. If you look on our website and you actually look at the epi curve and the trajectory of the pandemic right now, it is growing exponentially. This is not the situation we want to be in 16 months into a pandemic, where we have proven control measures.
New Zealand has become the first country to introduce a law that will require banks, insurers, investment managers to report the impacts of climate change on their business. All banks with an asset of more than $1 billion New Zealand dollars, insurers with more than $1 billion, and all equity and debt insurers listed on country's stock exchange will have to make disclosures. New Zealand government has introduced several policies to lower emissions during its second term, including promising to make its public sector carbon neutral by the year 2025 and buy only zero emissions public transport buses from the middle of this decade. And time now to get all the action from the world of sports. And my colleague Suchitra is joining us with all the developments.
Thank you, Shubhendu. And let's start with the good news for India. The International Cricket Council today announced the winners of the ICC Player of the Month Awards for March, which recognize and celebrate the best performances from both male and female cricketers across all forms of international cricket throughout the year. India's Bhuvneshwar Kumar won the ICC Men's Player of the Month for March 2021 for his impressive performances in India's recently concluded series against England. He was the standout bowler on either side in the white ball series and was chosen the winner for the month by fans and the ICC Voting Academy. South Africa's Lizel Lee, who played 4 ODIs against India, where she scored a century and 2 half-centuries to move to the top of the ICC Women's ODI batting rankings, was named the ICC Women's Player of the Month for March 2021. Sanju Samson's sensational 100 on his captaincy debut went in vain as young pacer Arshdeep Singh held his nerve in the final over to help Punjab Kings pull off a thrilling 4-run win over Rajasthan Royals in a high-scoring IPL game in Mumbai yesterday. KL Rahul, who made 91 of 50 balls, and Deepak Hooda, who made 64 of 28, powered Punjab Kings to an imposing 221 for 6 after being put into bat. Samson almost took Royals home with a breathtaking 119 of 63 balls, but was caught off the game's final ball with left-arm pacer Arshdeep defending 13 runs in the last over. Chelsea will be aiming to cruise through to the UEFA Champions League semi-final when they take on FC Porto tonight in Spain. Like the first leg, the second leg will also play out at the same stadium in Sevilla due to travel restrictions owing to the pandemic. Chelsea, having been the away team last time out, will be the host this time and walk into the game with a crucial 2-0 advantage courtesy of goals from Mason Mount and Ben Chilwell. Paris Saint-Germain host Bayern Munich in the UEFA Champions League quarter-final second leg tonight. PSG are bracing themselves for yet another defensive job ahead as they welcome Bayern Munich. It is the second leg affair with the hosts leading 3-2 on aggregate. It essentially means that the Ligue 1 giants only need to hold on to a draw to secure a berth in the semi-final for the second time in a row in this coveted competition. The Indian men's hockey team dropped one place to 5th in the FIH World Rankings despite its 2 wins against Olympic champions Argentina in the Pro League matches. India registered a comprehensive 3-0 win over Argentina on Sunday in Buenos Aires in the second match of the FIH Pro League. The Manpreet Singh-led side had also won the first match in a penalty shootout on Saturday, but the Indian team moved down a rung from the 4th spot it occupied in the January rankings, though it accumulated more points. Reigning world and European champions Belgium sit at the summit. Opener Edwin Markram struck a brisk half-century as South Africa defeated Pakistan by 6 wickets in the second T20 international at the Wanderers. With this win, the hosts also levelled the 4-game T20 international series. Pakistan elected to bat, but some poor stroke play saw them restricted to 140 for 9 in their 20 overs. South Africa never looked troubled in their reply as they reached their target with 36 balls left in a comprehensive win. So those were some sports updates. Back to you, Shubhendu.
Thanks, Sushil Chandra, for joining us with those updates. And with that, we conclude this edition of Midday Prime. News and updates continue after a short break. Namaskar.